Greetings, participants. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are very excited about the opportunity to be able to present on our topic, Gotta Catch 'em All, Inclusive Education Strategies to Reach Every Scholar. My name is Bianca Durgan, and I'm a Special Education Coordinator in Spring Independent School District.
And good morning, my name is Chandressa Banks. I am also a Special Education Coordinator in Spring ISD. Our learning objectives for today. So today you will be able, by the end of today rather, you will be able to utilize 3 inclusive education strategies to build an inclusive classroom environment where all scholars, regardless of abilities, will be able to learn together. So you may ask yourself, what exactly is inclusion? Inclusion means that all scholars learn together and have access to the general education curriculum. This is regardless of their labels, of ability levels, and it has to be with the appropriate services and supports. So inclusion is the practice of educating all students together. It is much more than pulling students with disabilities into a general education classroom. So there must be appropriate supports so students are able to learn alongside their peers without disabilities. Family members and educators must also work together to identify the services and supports needed to help each individual student succeed.
So, what is inclusion? Inclusion involves the process of systematic reform embodying changes and modifications in content, teaching methods, approaches, structures, and strategies in education to overcome barriers with a vision serving to provide all students of the relevant age range with an equitable and participatory learning experience and environment that best meets their needs. Simply placing students with disabilities within mainstream classes without the accompanying supports is not inclusion.
When we think about what an inclusive classroom looks like or what inclusion is, there are some things that inclusion is and there are some things that inclusion is not. A truly inclusive school or classroom is one that embraces diversity, creates a culture where all students feel a sense of belonging, equality, and individual worth. In an inclusive school or classroom, everyone believes that all students can learn. Teachers in these inclusive schools work together to plan effective instruction and quality instruction for all students in general ed rather than segregated or separate classrooms and places. Inclusion does not mean students with disabilities are educated in classrooms where all the students are on the same ability level. Teachers in inclusive classrooms do not water down the curriculum. Rather, they provide varied methods of instruction and assessment based on learning, readiness, and preferences. We all know that a one-size-fits-all approach does not work today in a diverse classroom. So you may ask yourself, is my classroom a classroom that is inclusive? What we have for you is a checklist, and you're going to take a few moments to look at this checklist and see if your classroom is really inclusive. Why is inclusion important? The most current research was done or released in 2017, and it was called A Summary of the Evidence of Inclusive Education. We know that inclusive education does work. Students develop stronger skills in reading and math. The research showed that students had higher rates of attendance. Students were less likely to have behavioral problems, and students were more likely to be enrolled in post-secondary education. As adults, students with disabilities who have been included are even more likely to be enrolled not only in post-secondary education, but also to be employed and live independently.
So, who makes inclusion work? Well, it takes a team to effectively include all students. Inclusion takes place when people are committed to joining each other on the journey to building an inclusive school or community, no matter how bumpy the road might be. Inclusion involves team members who hold a common belief that they can work together to solve messy problems, make informed decisions, and develop inclusive educational practices that benefit all students. It includes administrators, teachers, And parents, the vision for an inclusive school begins with strong leadership from district and school administration. They lay the foundation for schools where all students belong. For inclusion to work, administrators must create a culture that embraces diversity and where all students feel a sense of belonging, equality, and individual worth. Effective school leaders support innovation and motivate others to set goals and take action. They involve all stakeholders, including families, in planning for difficult changes. They challenge low expectations and find resources to help teams plan and implement effective inclusion. They understand that while some people may embrace change, others will need more support to understand and adopt an inclusive education practice. So you may be asking yourself, what are the keys to making inclusion work for all scholars? Inclusion begins with strong leadership from district and school administrators. Administrators and district leadership, they lay the foundation for schools where all students belong. Next, it will take a team of general education teachers, special education teachers, families, and students working together to ensure that systematic barriers are removed from lessons and that every student gets what they need. Lastly, it will take access to research-based effective classroom instruction that addresses each student's individual learning needs, interests, and abilities. Research shows that students with exceptionalities can be more successful when they have access to the same curriculum and are held to the same standards as students without exceptionalities. In inclusion, there is no fence. All of the systematic barriers are removed and everyone plays. So what are 3 inclusive strategies that we can implement to reach every scholar? Well, let's see. Strategy number 1 is getting to know your scholars. You can get to know your scholars by creating student learning profiles using student learning inventories. It's no secret that relationship building is a key component of effective teaching. Getting to know your students not only increases trust and engagement, but it also helps you differentiate instruction and personalized learning. The more a teacher knows about a student's background, their home environment, their strengths, the knowledge that they have, their learning styles, the better he or she can target inclusion towards the child's learning needs. In fact, studies show that knowledge of individual students does have a measurable positive impact on achievement. A learning profile is a document that helps students learn more about their students. Learner profiles may include information such as skills, strengths and interests, aspirations and passions, likes and dislikes, life experience, how the student prefers to learn, struggles or potential barriers to learning, and anything else the student or teacher deems important. Once you have the student learning profiles completed, you can now use this information to inform your instruction. Consider your students' strengths, weaknesses, and learning styles when creating lessons, planning for accommodations, and even grouping students strategically. Your knowledge of your student will enhance their learning and boost their achievement. So strategy number 1 is getting to know your students. You can do that by creating student learning profiles using student learning inventories. Strategy number 2 is all about students learning in different ways. So how do you do that? You use multisensory instruction, of course. At the most basic level, our brains perceive stimuli through the 5 senses: seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling. Multisensory instruction is a way of teaching that engages more than one sense at a time. Some people's sensory perception is stronger in one area than another, and most of us learn best when information and ideas are presented in a multisensory approach. All kids can benefit from multisensory lessons. If kids learn something using more than one sense, the information is more likely to stick. The result is better memory of the skill, and not every lesson has to use all 5 senses. But in most multisensory lessons, kids engage with the material in more than one way. So inclusive strategy number 2 is using multisensory instruction. So recently, tennis star Naomi Osaka was recently fined for not speaking at the French Open. Naomi shared that she did not speak because she has social anxiety when speaking. While Naomi chose to be open about her mental health and experience, the French Open responded by finding her instead of taking the opportunity to understand that each of us is unique and may have different needs. We may excel in one area, but struggle in another area. Inclusivity is everyone receiving the support or accommodations that they need to be successful, not everyone receiving the same thing. In our classrooms, we have students who may shy away from speaking out in front of others because they experience social anxiety when speaking or have a communication disorder that affects them. How do we as inclusive educators respond in these instances? Well, let's talk about it. So, in the case of tennis star Naomi Osaka, I think the French Open missed an opportunity to be inclusive. Inclusion is everyone receiving what they need, not everyone receiving the same thing. I think they missed the opportunity to celebrate her ability to be open and honest about what was going on. And I think as an educator, we can take that experience and learn from it and know that every student may or may not appear to have a disability, may have a disability or an exceptionality or a social anxiety disorder that prohibits them from feeling comfortable or being able to speak out in public. With that being said, inclusive strategy number 3 is a really good way to make sure that everyone is getting what they need. By providing students with multiple means of expression, you're allowing students to express what they know in multiple ways and ensuring that all students feel included. And our last bonus strategy is really just talking about having empathy because it's a prerequisite to inclusion. Empathy is the ability to understand or feel what someone else is feeling or the ability to see the situation from their point of view. As an inclusive educator, we need to empathize with our students and the staff we work with daily. Sometimes our patience can be very short for other adults, but I challenge each of us to step back and truly consider what our teammates are going through to help them capitalize on their strengths. We may have colleagues that have invisible disabilities that we do not see. As such, it's very important that we appreciate them as human beings, see their world, understand their feelings, listen actively, and communicate our understanding for them. Thank you for the opportunity to present, and I thank each of you for being here and viewing our virtual presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you find the handouts provided very helpful and are able to add some of those strategies or handouts to your inclusive teacher toolbox. Thank you, and I hope you have a great day.